Looks exactly the same as the last one. Did it work or no?
No, it worked.
All right.
Be good. Be good. We're good.
Jesus Christ, Yoshida got another hit.
Who did?
Yoshida.
Nice. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 146 of the Salvaggio and Cratty Sports Podcast. Here for yet another Wednesday night, June 7th at 7:14 p.m. We will not be starting with Moments of the Week today because we're just not doing it this week. That's why.
We're not creative.
It's okay. Still plenty other stuff to talk to. But before we do that, as always, Ryan, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing good. No complaints.
That's good. Lovely. Nice to hear that. But yeah, let's get right into it. We'll start with Celtics. Joe Mazzulla makes his first addition to the staff, or Brad Stevens, really. And it's a familiar face in Sam Cassell.
Yeah, like I sent, I think I either DM'd you or texted you. I can't remember exactly which one it was, but when it happened, I don't think it's too crazy, at least unless they make some sort of massive trade this offseason. Could potentially be the biggest pickup of the offseason for the Celtics. I don't think that's too far-fetched to say because of what Sam Cassell brings to the table. Obviously, a guy with plenty of playing experience, coaching experience, has done pretty much everything you can do in the NBA from a player experience. Was a former first-round pick in the 1993 draft, 24th overall to Houston. So knows what it's like to be not a high, but a first-round pick. So can relate to guys like Tatum, Brown, Smart, if they're all here next year and stuff like that. Won 3 titles while playing a 15-year career over 8 teams. Was a one-time All-Star and All-NBA the 2023-24 season with Minnesota. For coaching experience, of course, spent the last 14 years as an NBA assistant coach. Pretty much worked as like a player/coach type of thing in 08 and 09 with the Celtics before he went on to be an actual assistant with other teams. Worked 5 seasons with Washington, 6 with the Clippers, and 3 with Philadelphia. A lot of his coaching tenure was under Doc Rivers, of course. And then when it comes to coaching star players, you can do that as well. Worked, of course, with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard with the Clippers, and then worked with James Harden and Joel Embiid the last couple of years in Philadelphia. So, of course, no stranger to working with superstar accomplished players in the league. And then from a Celtics experience, played more postseason games and regular season games in 2008. Played 21 postseason games and 17 in the regular season. If you ask Kevin Garnett, he's notoriously been vocal on Cassell on what he was able to do to help Garnett kind of grow into the player he was during their time in Minnesota in the early 2000s. And then Paul Pierce also has been on record for crediting Sam Cassell as being a big part of the Celtics 2008 title run, of course. So a great get, a guy, like I said, who has had plenty of experience, isn't afraid not to call guys out, but I'm sure people who are listening have seen the video on Twitter at Philadelphia 76ers practice where him kind of giving the business to James Harden when he was questioned a couple of things, not like getting pissed at him, but just not afraid to like tell a superstar player like what obviously needs to get done. So I love it. I think it's a great first edition. I hope there's more to come. The Celtics themselves seem to think that seem to be working towards more stuff. This was from Yahoo Sports' Jake Fisher, said the Celtics are currently targeting a former Bucks top assistant, Charles Lee, to add to Mazzulla's staff as well. Look, it's early in the offseason. I'm just glad they're being super proactive with this stuff. Obviously, we heard talks of maybe, I think it was Steven Silas potentially joining the staff, but he ended up going to Detroit. It seems like it came down to either him or Sam Cassell. I'll take Sam Cassell again for all the experience that he had and all the seemingly success. Like if this was one of the top guys on the market, they seem to have got one of the top guys. So I'm perfectly fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, nothing but what I've heard about him past and present really has me worried about this in any way. So I'm cool with it. Obviously has, the respect of a Celtics legend or two in Pierce and KG, which never hurts either. And, if he's got the, not the balls, but the right state of mind to yell at James Harden when that clown ass is fucking off, he'll hopefully not have to do that here, but he will if needed. So I like that. I feel
like that's a good thing too, because we heard it last year with Udoka when they were struggling. Like he was not afraid to go into timeouts and flat out tell guys they were playing like a-holes. I remember was one of the quotes, telling guys that they sucked out there. And the Celtics obviously rode that to the finals and seemed to take that advice, I guess, for lack of a better term, in good ways. Obviously, we kind of got a little bit on Joe Mazzulla jokingly whenever something like that happened, and he was the complete opposite and was like, "Oh, I told guys I love them." So maybe these Celtics players need a little bit more of hard ass coaching, and if Cassell can bring that, I'm perfectly fine with it.
Yep, love it. Nothing to really hate there.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Just going down the list. I mean, a lot of stuff has come out with the Celtics. I didn't know if you wanted me to take it or you to take it, but we'll go on. Brad Stevens, of course, had his end of the season presser. I thought he gave a couple of not telling answers because obviously there's a lot of stuff that has to happen this offseason. But shored up a couple of things. I guess we'll start with the Joe Mazzulla stuff because that was probably the more clear and present of everything. Maybe to the chagrin of some people, maybe, there were people that were hoping for this to happen. I think once we talked about it last week, and I said that there was a report that Mazzulla was under contract for 3 years and $14 million. There really wasn't going to be a way the Celtics would let him go. Brad Stevens confirmed that last week. I think it was last either Thursday or Friday this happened, but said that Joe Mazzulla will be back coaching the Celtics next season and thought he did a good job given the situation he was thrust into. And then, of course, also went on to say this was before they got Cassell, saying the Celtics will look to add veteran coach with plenty of experience in the league. Of course, they did that. Then also backed up something we talked about last week, the Damon Stoudemire stuff. When he left, the Celtics tried to obviously replace him, but with it being mid-season, you weren't going to find a lot of guys available that could fill his role. So nothing too crazy stood out there to me. Like I said, we talked about it last week, the Mazzulla future stuff. Anything that you had to add there, anything that kind of stood out from maybe those mini comments that Brad Stevens had?
Not really. It's just I wanted, to some extent to maybe move on from Mazzulla, but once I was reminded by you that he's under contract for multiple years, I kind of just was like, okay, he's gonna stick around. So
yeah, like we said, I think if he struggles next year and it looks like he didn't make any sort of strides this year to next year, then I think maybe you could bring that discussion up again. Like, okay, things aren't improving. They made all these moves to get veteran coaches in here to help them, and things didn't go well. So maybe that's something that, that door opens up again next offseason. But of course, we'll have to get there first and see what will happen. The next, obviously, the bigger two names to come up, Jaylen Brown's his future. Brad Stevens was asked about if he'd offer Jaylen Brown the contract extension and if he felt that Jaylen Brown wanted to be here. And Brad Stevens said, quote, "I'm not allowed to talk about the contract details, let alone the extension. But I can say without a doubt, we want Jaylen to be here. And he's a big part of us, and we believe in him, and I'm thankful for him." So I think that kind of, some people took it as maybe a squash of any sort of Jaylen Brown trade stuff that could come up. Now, of course, like Brad Stevens said, he can't really talk about any sort of details or, contract stuff, extension stuff with the NBA rules and the tampering and everything. Where were you at on him? I don't know, we were maybe on the fence last week a little bit about just flat out trading Jaylen Brown. I don't know if you had maybe any sort of change in mindset or anything Brad Stevens said there maybe swayed your mind one way or the other.
No, I think you got to trade him to have some big shakeup that isn't Jason Tatum, which is not going to happen. And I think it just makes the most sense. And it sucks as a Jaylen Brown guy, but there's a good chance it happens. And you just hope they maximize the return. Absolutely.
I mean, we talked about it last week too, for the people that missed it. For the people that didn't know, if Jaylen Brown is to get that $295 million contract extension, it makes him the highest paid player in NBA history. He's a great player, but I think we talked about it last week too. I don't know if I brought up the players specifically, but Jaylen Brown is not a guy by any means that should be making more money than likes of Steph Curry, LeBron, KD. So to have him up there, I've seen some people talk about it, maybe people's judgment had been clouded with the bad game 7. Still a great player, still brings a lot to the table. So people don't forget that. But again, that is a lot of money to be giving a guy that is not, worth being the highest paid player in the NBA. That's not going to happen. So if they can get him to come down, I think I talked about this too. If you can get some sort of number that's higher than what he can get on the open market from a team, but definitely not that $295 million and get him paid whatever it was going to be, $60 million AAV, then maybe you can get him to maybe agree to that. But to give him and make him the highest paid player would not be a smart decision for the Celtics.
No, it would not.
Nope. Brad Stevens was also asked about the core of the roster, because that was something that's come up. We've talked about it. Maybe you shake up, maybe not Jaylen Brown, maybe a Marcus Smart is a guy that moves. I've seen some people say maybe Rob Williams to get something back, Malcolm Brogdon. Brad Stevens had this to say. He said, quote, "Every team is going to have to make tough decisions every year. But at the end of the day, we love our foundation, we love our core, and that's really our focus, our priority. I was also asked whether or not the Celtics team matched the vision that he wanted this season. He said it's not far. We just got to figure out how to get a little bit better. So to me, that kind of seems like a big, I mean, again, it is early, so things could change. The vision, the mindset could change. But just taking that at face value, to me, it kind of seems like they might want to try to run it back again. Like maybe they do give Jaylen Brown that big contract extension and then try to tinker with some pieces here and there. How would you feel about that type of thing? Or I feel like you're more set in stone on some sort of big change needs to happen for this team to make the, right step in the right direction.
I think a more than good enough shakeup is trade Brown and Smart, Pritchard, and let Grant go. That's where I'm at.
I've seen, some people said that as well. I think Pritchard and Grant are both two that are probably going to be gone, because Pritchard was asked about Pritchard as well. This was from Jared Weiss tweet he had saying that Steven said he's a big fan of Peyton Pritchard and understands how Pritchard feels after the guard made it clear he wanted to be traded. Said that everyone around the league knows he can play and understands he's stuck behind good vets. We'll see how that shakes out. On Grant Williams, said, quote, Grant is a good layer who was on a really deep team with the additions of Brogdon last year, was going to require that guys who got a little bit more opportunity, wasn't going to get as much. Everyone around the league knows Grant can make an impact. Pritchard, we talked about it when he requested the trade before the trade deadline, didn't get moved. It kind of just felt like a writing on the wall type of thing. He's a guy that has shown he can play. I mean, had the triple-double at the end of the season against Atlanta, has some scoring ability, did kind of get put in a bad situation in the playoff series where he got put out there against Miami and didn't really do a whole lot because nothing really went through him. So that maybe made him look a little worse than he is. But I'm with you. I think Pritchard's most likely gone. I heard the other day or saw on Twitter that the Magic, who have a decent amount of cap space, are probably going to make a run at Grant Williams. I thought I saw Toronto might be involved too, or interested at least. I think the Celtics, if I remember correctly, they can pick up Grant's, or could do something with Grant. They could make him a restricted free agent or do something where he's offered like $4.5 million. I got to think Grant Williams is probably as good as gone too. Like they're not Celtics. We talked about it before. I'm going to pay him the $20 million that he wants or that he asked for. So those are two guys you're probably going to have to move on for. Maybe you do a sign and trade to get something back for them. That's how I would try to approach it. And I feel like they'll probably try to do it that way too. But where it seems like an agreement that both those guys are most likely going to be gone.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see a scenario where either of them are there.
Mm-hmm.
And on Smart too, like I'm not like clamoring to trade Smart, and maybe trading Pritchard and Brown is enough and letting go of Grant is enough for a big shakeup. But I don't know. I feel like you might need a little more. And I think not Rob Williams, got all the names that have been thrown out there mixed up in my mind. I think Smart could get you the most. And like I said last week, after seeing how Derek White played in game 6 and 7 against the Heat, I don't really want to trade him anymore, because I feel like that's the type of guy you're going to need if you want to win that elusive championship down the road.
I'm with you. Again, I don't want to, it's just coming from the fan standpoint. You don't obviously never want to trade anybody. We're going through the same thing with the Bruins. You don't want to trade any of these guys because you've grown obviously fond of them, but it comes a time where something obviously has to move. And Smart's the easier player to replace. You have Derek White, you have Malcolm Brogdon, similar players at similar positions. So the loss of Smart, I don't think would hurt as bad, but I'm with you. If you're going to do something, you have to make some sort of substantial move. I've seen people say too, that obviously there's been talk of in the locker room type of stuff, how much you want to read into it, where people are like, does Marcus Smart think this is his team? Do you want to, make it more so that it's Jason Tatum's team? That's the type of league it is. Obviously, there are some people I've seen say, if you do trade Marcus Smart, maybe that finally clicks in Tatum's head that, hey, this is my team. I'm the guy. Because people made the argument that Marcus Smart was obviously the first guy here out of him, Brown, and Tatum. Maybe he sees himself as I'm the leader just because of that. But maybe that's something the Celtics will look into too. And then on the injury front, kind of like hockey, you get these injury things that come out at the end of the season during the wrap-ups. This is from Brian Robb saying, his tweet talking about Brad Stevens, what he said about the injuries, said, quote, Jason had a pretty decent ankle sprain. Malcolm was going to figure out what he's going to do when it comes to surgery. And then Derek White also hyperextended his knee in game 7. And then I was listening to Felger and Maz last week, and their producer, Jimmy Stewart, he has some inside sources that they always like to go to, said that believe that if Jason Tatum, if the Celtics were to make the NBA Finals, there was some thought that Tatum, his injury was so bad, he may have missed the finals altogether. So that's kind of a dreary thing to end on there when it comes to the wrap-up stuff. But really, like no surprise. You knew Malcolm Brogdon was going to have to figure out what the deal was with his elbow. Maybe that's a reason the Celtics maybe look to move him if they think he's damaged goods moving forward. White, I think it explains. I saw some people kind of get on and question why Derek White had such a great third quarter, but didn't really play a whole lot of the fourth. I think maybe the hyperextension in his knee, depending on when that happened, answers that question. And then we all knew that Tatum was dealing with, playing through a pretty substantial injury and trying to gut that out.
Yeah, agreed. And it just sucks looking back on the Tatum injury, especially. It just felt like a bad omen, and it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll have to see how that, I don't know if anything is like surgery wise, Tatum needs that, but that's something obviously to monitor as the offseason goes on. And then the other Celtics stuff too, there was a good article from The Athletic, Jay King and Jared Weiss talking about the Celtics season, kind of doing a wrap up of their own. And then Boston Sports Gordo on Twitter did a good job for the people that do not subscribe to The Athletic, kind of just summarizing the main tweets. I thought I'd just kind of run through the big seven that he had and kind of share our thoughts on that. I'll tee him up, you knock him down. The first one we already kind of talked about. Peyton Pritchard has made it clear he wants to be traded this offseason. Any other thoughts there that you may have, not had? All right. Like I said, I think that was pretty much set in stone. That's probably going to be the first domino to fall is he's going to be dealt somewhere where he's going to get more of an opportunity to play. Because again, the guy has shown he can play in the league and probably deserves a bigger role with another team. Tweet number 2 was when the Celtics lost game 3 to Miami and fell down 0-3. Owner Wick Grosbeck came into the locker room and delivered a message that the players need to, quote, play with some balls. The locker room was stunned. Any thoughts on that?
Good.
I'm with you. I like and also don't like that it was the owner that had to come in and say that. Like a player doesn't step up. And maybe the players did. We don't know about it. But like anytime you see or hear Wick Grosbeck, I don't know how many interviews you've seen of him. He seems like a pretty mild-mannered guy. Obviously loves the team and, obviously talks very highly of the team whenever he talks about them. But I would say that's probably pretty surprising seeing him go into the locker room and start maybe, cussing guys out. But again, I don't know how I feel about it. That's the guy that has to come into the locker room and basically tell guys to wake the F up pretty much. So see if there's any, not repercussions, but anything else comes from that. Like if he maybe has any more say on what the Celtics should do moving forward or stuff like that.
Yeah, I like it. That's all I got to say. It's good.
All right. Tweet number 3 from the article then said sources both on the roster and the staff told Jay King and Jared Weiss that, again, we knew this one, Damon Stoudemire's departure to become Georgia Tech's head coach in March left a significant void in the team's leadership structure. I really don't have to, unless you had anything else you wanted to add to that you didn't touch on before. Like I said, probably pretty hard to fill a pretty substantial coaching role right in the middle of the season. Not the Celtics were blindsided with him leaving. I think everyone knew that was going to happen, but came at a kind of bad time. And like I said, middle of the season, you're not going to find a coach that can, do what Damon Stoudemire did. Tweet number 4. While Joe Mazzulla's leadership style was generally supported, many of the Celtics top players disagree with the coaching staff's on-court philosophy which focus more on offense than defense. Your thoughts on that?
I get the gripe, but I don't know enough about the intricacies of basketball to give like a detailed answer.
I gotcha. But yeah, I mean, I think that's another one too that kind of came out in that it definitely came out in that Miami series where when the Celtics played well those last games 4, 5, and 6, you saw them get back to their more defensive focus. You heard a lot of players obviously talk about that in their post-game interviews. To talk about the loss of defensive identity. And I hope that's something that sticks moving forward. Because again, like you saw last year when the Celtics were so good, they rode their defense to the finals. Offense isn't something that's going to win you. I mean, maybe it does, but more so than not, the cliche defense wins championships. That's what I'm hoping for. Like this team gets back to their defense first mentality. Because I think that's what makes them more successful than just trying to bludgeon teams to death with offense.
Yeah. And speaking of bludgeon teams with offense, shooting too many threes.
Yeah, that's another thing that needs to, and I think that goes with it too, like a change in philosophy altogether. Like change your offensive philosophy to be more balanced, and then change your defensive philosophy or just entirely your philosophy of getting back to playing more lockdown defense. Because I think that again, that's what works better for this or best for this team.
Absolutely.
Yep. The next tweet from the article, Joe Mazzulla started being more aggressive with his timeouts after the Celtics went down 0-3 to Miami, calling them when the team needed a reset. Multiple players and coaches told Jay King and Jared Weiss that this was a much needed shift from Mazzulla. That one I feel like kind of just speaks for itself. Like we talked about that. It was not a great coaching showcase for Mazzulla in these playoffs, but I think we can both agree that as the season went on and as things became more dire, he kind of started to figure things out a little bit. And again, that's something you hope moving forward, he can continue into next season.
Yeah, and I hope next season it doesn't take going down 0-3 in the
to wake everybody up.
Finals to start using timeouts when you need them.
It is funny though. I don't know if you saw, or you've probably watched about as much as I have when it comes to the finals. But
I've watched less, buddy.
I haven't watched any. So if you could watch less than any, then yeah. But no, it was funny that both coaches decided to. That game came down to a buzzer beater attempt from Jamal Murray. I believe both coaches left 2 timeouts, or at least Denver's head coach left 2 timeouts in his pocket. So hopefully Joe Mazzulla was not watching that game and was like, see, it's okay when teams that make the finals do it. So
verbal meme, Leonardo DiCaprio snapping at the TV screen.
Yeah, from what's it? Something in Hollywood.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Thank you. Yep. Pretty decent movie, I would say.
Great movie.
Great ending. It took a while to get there, at least in my opinion, but
the ending was psychotic.
It was insane.
Awesome,
yeah.
though.
Yep. The second to last tweet number 6, a Celtics source told Jay King and Jared Weiss that some Celtics players, or some of the Celtics best players, quote unquote, just lost focus after the All-Star break. The Celtics came out of the break 7-6. Any thoughts there? Like, not a great thing to admit that obviously their best players, you got to think that's guys like Tatum and Brown. But again, I think that goes into kind of the mindset we talked about last week of this team just loses focus and kind of comes out thinking, hey, we're the Celtics, we can beat anyone, and it continues to bite them in the ass.
Reinforces the need for a big change too.
Yeah, I think that one, for the people like you that are arguing for that, maybe a big shakeup, that I think that's something you can fall back on and see, well, if they're going to continue to do this, something has to change where maybe just the shock of a Jaylen Brown trade, a Marcus Smart trade says, oh crap, maybe we need to wake up here a little bit and not continue to do these things. Who knows though? And then the last one I found pretty interesting. I wanted to get your thoughts on as well. Several veteran players did not agree with Joe Mazzulla's removing of Grant Williams from the rotation this season. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown both met with Mazzulla in March to implore him to put Grant Williams back in the rotation. Joe listened to them. I'll let you go first, give your thoughts, and I'll share mine to kind of finish things up. Or if you had any overall thoughts that maybe stood out to you.
I don't really know on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the fence.
I'd like to know, like, again, Grant Williams, I don't know if you want to say took a step down from what he did, like, because he had a great season, like breakout season under Ime Udoka, and then, had a decent start to this year. Again, I don't know if he fell out of favor or what. Like, I would like to know what the reason was, and I'm sure that's what Tatum and Brown went into the meeting being like, why is this guy who helped us late last season and into the playoffs and was great, at times in the Milwaukee and Miami series 2 years ago, why is this guy not playing? I would have loved to know, and you're never going to get it because that's, in the walls, in the locker room, whatever, the cliche. I'd love to know why Grant Williams was taken out of the rotation. Like, what exactly? Because again, maybe that's what it was. Joe Mazzulla was just so hell-bent on just the offensive focus. Grant Williams is more of a defensive specialist, I feel like, more so than an offensive guy. Even with the strides he's taken, maybe that's what Mazzulla saw and was like, this guy's more defense focused. I want to be more offense focused. But again, like you saw in the Miami series, minus getting into it with Jimmy Butler, like what Grant Williams can do for you when he's out there, giving you energy. Like, it seems like that was what the Celtics, especially in the second half of the year, needed. And, not having him out there was a problem. Look, I'm glad that obviously Joe Mazzulla listened to his 2 star players. And I'm glad both of the star players had Grant Williams' back. Like, that's the thing. I feel like the players that don't care could have just been like, all right, Grant's out of the rotation. Who cares? He's like the 7th, 8th guy on the bench anyway. He doesn't really affect us. It's good to see, again, with all the talk and rumors that maybe the locker room was divided, stuff like that, these 2 guys sticking up for his teammates. So there's a positive, I think, you could take away from it in that sense, if you look into it that way.
That's a good point. I didn't really think of it like that.
Thank you. And now we have to see if the Celtics really want Grant Williams back or not. Like you said, he's a guy that I think, wouldn't overpay to get him back here. It'd be nice to have him, but maybe he's a guy you move on from. Maybe, like I said, he's a guy you try to work out a sign and trade and get something in return, because you don't want to lose him for nothing, but it's going to be tough. Again, it depends on what kind of role he wants, what kind of money he wants, and, to see what happens moving forward.
Maybe he reunites with Ime.
Maybe, like, that's, I think, I've seen people say, him, Pritchard, if there's a Brown trade to be made, like, Houston's a team that could sneak in there because of the Ime Udoka connections. So that'll be something to obviously keep a close eye on.
Absolutely. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get into hockey, wait, are you
I was just going to say, unless there's anything else, I did remember though, one kind of not Celtics related, but NBA related news. I don't know how much time we wanted to spend on this, that broke before we jumped on, was that the Phoenix Suns were reportedly releasing Chris Paul. Anyone who has listened to me, I think I've said it before on this show or back at our Merrimack days, I am 100% out on that. I want nothing to do with Chris Paul. I've seen people argue like, oh, he's done plenty in the NBA and he's got a historic NBA career, going to be a Hall of Famer. Don't care. We talked about it numerous times, how soft this team was and not being able to get over the hump. Chris Paul is a guy that I don't think gets you over the hump because he himself, until a couple of years ago, could never get over the hump and was on the bad side, bad receiving end of some pretty historically bad performances in the playoffs, and bad losses on teams that he was a part of. So unless you feel differently, I don't think you do from what we've talked about off air. I don't want any part of Chris Paul.
Me neither.
All right. Fair enough.
He just loses a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Don't need that. Need winners, not losers. Or
correct.
Players that are trying to win that are, a better fit.
Mm-hmm.
More so than a 38-year-old guy who has
that too. The age is something that I am not part of. I did see there was a tweet that said the Celtics are one of, I think it was 4 or 5 teams, including the Lakers, Bucks, and somebody else along with the Celtics that are going to touch base. I don't know how true that report was or not. I forgot to see who would get the source and put that in the outline. But if he wants to be a Laker, that's fine by me. If he wants to be a Buck, how much does he make that team better? Beats me, but out on Chris Paul. Cannot stress that enough.
Me too. On to hockey. We have more news than I expected, honestly, a couple days
Wheels
ago.
are turning a little bit.
Wheels are turning.
Mm-hmm.
And we have some breaking news.
Is it Bruins related?
No, unfortunately not.
Darn.
Adam Fantilli, largely the consensus number 2 pick, is considering a return to Michigan this year, which who
has the number 2 pick?
Ducks.
Oh, he doesn't want to be in it. He's like you. He hates the Anaheim Ducks.
Yeah, fair. Leo Carlson, the number 3 consensus pick, had a pretty good World Championships the last couple of weeks. Wonder if Anaheim considers Leo Carlson.
If it's towards him, yeah.
I don't know. Looks pretty good. I mean, they're both big centers, productive in their own rights this year. To me, I don't really know what else Fantilli has to prove besides winning a national championship. He had like 65 points as a freshman. He won the Hobie Baker. Decent tournament run. Maybe he just wants that national championship. We'll see. But I thought that was pretty interesting. Didn't expect to see that today. But other than that, we have some Bruins and some NHL stuff. First with the Bruins prioritizing Bertuzzi, something we had hoped
love it
would be the case, and it is happening. Lovely. We don't have to go through all the trade possibilities again because everybody's heard him now, and it'll make our head spin.
Yep.
But if you're a Bruins fan, you know the drill. You know the guys that are in the mix. I keep saying to potentially be moved, but we'll see what happens there. I like that he is a priority. Makes a lot of sense. I don't believe this rumor, not like throwing shots at Jimmy Stewart or anything, but the whole Lindholm and Orlov thing, where they're considering trading Lindholm, is it like Orlov? I don't see it. He doesn't make a ton of money, for a number 1 top pairing potential defenseman.
He's younger too, isn't he?
Trading a guy on a 7-year deal in Lindholm is virtually impossible to do.
Yeah, I can't imagine there's many buyers for that contract, whether you like the player or not. Like that's going to be a tough, unless you attach a draft pick or 2 to that contract to sweeten the deal a little bit.
I don't even know if it's that. It's just like it's so hard to move a deal that's that long. True, and he has a no trade and a no move.
So yeah, you're kind of handcuffed there, and then some. Isn't the consensus too that Orlov is not 100% because there's nothing's really ever 100%, but like pretty sure he's going to end up back in Washington. Isn't that the consensus?
That is something he would like, yes.
Okay.
And he's spending his summer with his old teammate Evgeny Kuznetsov, hanging out and stuff. So
like, God forbid you do find some sort of miraculous trade for Lindholm, and then Orlov leaves you at the altar. Like, that's going to look really bad. Now you're down 2 defensemen instead of 1, and the offseason of question marks just gets a whole lot more confusing.
Yeah. Luckily, I don't think we'll have to worry about that.
No, I'm with you. I don't think they maybe a year or two from now, they might start to wonder if the Lindholm deal was worth it and maybe look to get out from under it. But right now, like, again, now that what we know with him playing with a broken foot, like I think a lot of people's strong opinions on Lindholm maybe have come off a little bit,
including mine.
Yeah, so I think you continue to ride Lindholm, and see where you go from there.
I agree. Yeah, not much really more to add, but that was pretty wild to see, unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
This morning I was wondering, as I have quite a bit past few weeks, what is going on with David Krejci? He has to be retiring, right? Like,
But I saw your
said,
cryptic thing that he put out, or your tweet,
yeah,
or no, it was on Snapchat,
um,
whatever it was on. I can't
that was
remember.
his wife.
No.
My consensus right now is like, if he said a couple weeks to mull this over after the season, and it's in like 7 or 8 or something now, he's got to be retiring.
Yeah, I think he's done.
But then his wife Naomi posted a moving story today on Instagram. So they moving back to Boston. Do they have something in the works? And he's, getting back up there so he can train,
Mm-hmm.
or are they going back to the Czech Republic?
We have no idea where I mean, there's probably no way to know that unless it was like tagged as she didn't tag like, oh, moving. Okay, so I was gonna say if it was moving from, that would obviously give you your answer. If it was moving from Boston to back to the Czech, I think you'd have 100%. He's retiring, but yeah, I'm with you. The timing is a little weird, and with how long it's taken him to give some sort of response or answer, like I feel like I'm leaning more towards the retirement announcement coming again than anything else.
Yeah, me too. But this was interesting to see, and timing was interesting after putting this in the outline.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting what if as well came along today. On 32 Thoughts, Elliot Friedman said at the 2015 draft, the Coyotes could have traded the 3rd overall pick to the Bruins for Dougie Hamilton, but Dodd Maloney, who I don't believe is with the organization anymore, chose to keep it because in their division, they'd go up against guys like Joe Thornton, who is in his, his better days, not his prime back then, Ryan Getzlaf and Anze Kopitar, but they decided to keep it and select Dylan Strome. Me thinks the Bruins would have taken Mitch Marner with the 3rd pick.
Ooh,
and not Dylan Strome. And that would have been nuts. And I say this because Dylan Strome, by most, was considered the higher, ranked prospect, more consensus to go to the Coyotes. But the Bruins had Bergeron and Krejci playing pretty good around that time.
Yeah, I'd say so.
You think, David Pastrnak, it's just a year after his draft. You don't know if he's a sure thing. So you take another shot at a really high-end winger in Mitch Marner. It's just a crazy what if situation. Sure. My goodness. The NHL trade market is heating up and some signings are happening. Cole Caulfield, to start it off, got paid more than I expected, coming off of, a big time shoulder injury. He got 8 years, 7.85 per. I think that's a little rich, but not crazy rich. He is very good. He's a very good goal scorer, but I was expecting a number closer to 7. But he's a guy that can potentially score 40 consistently. So don't think that'll age too terribly at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
What's next? The big one.
Massive trade.
Yeah, the Blue Jackets, Kings, and Flyers came out of nowhere yesterday and made a big trade.
Stuff like this, to me, just real quick before you get into it, like it always amazes me that the NHL playoffs are still going on and you're having guys get paid, guys get signed, extensions, stuff like that. Massive trades are happening and there's no like rule against it, which is kind of crazy to me because I feel like that doesn't happen in any other sport.
Yeah, it is pretty wacky, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Blue Jackets acquired Ivan Provorov, who the Kings retained 30% on, to get his number for the next 2 years down to 4.725. The Kings took on a couple contracts, Kevin Connaughton and Hayden Hodgson, and also, the portion of Provorov's contract. And the reward for doing so was getting rid of Cal Peterson's contract, who they had sent down during the season. The Flyers can either trade him, buy him out, or bury that in the minors now. The Flyers, who come out as the bandits in this trade for their trouble, get a solid 3rd pair of fringe 2nd pair defenseman in Sean Walker at just $2.65 million. Helge Grans, very surprised for him to be moved. He is considered one of the better defensive prospects in the league. Not known for his defense as a defensive prospect, but seen as a highly regarded offensive puck-moving defenseman. So That's pretty nice for the Flyers. They need all the help they can get in their rebuild. Speaking of helping their rebuild, they get a second in 2024 from the Kings, a first this year from the Blue Jackets, which was of the Kings, ironically enough, from the Gavrikov trade. We'll talk about him later. And then they get a conditional second from Columbus that Columbus can decide before the draft whether they want it to be 2024, 2025. The Flyers just absolutely made out like bandits.
Massive haul, yeah.
Like, talk about an epic first trade for Danny Briere. I really thought when it first came out, it was going to be Cal Peterson, Sean Walker, and like a second going to Philly. And it was all that plus a second, a first, and a really good prospect. Very surprised. Good trade for Philly. I wonder how Provorov bounces back or doesn't bounce back in Columbus, because one of the big things for him was he played some of the hardest minutes in the league the past few years, and that's why he is falling off a cliff. Does that change in a Mike Babcock Columbus Blue Jacket system? Buddy, I don't know, but
probably not. That'd be my guess. Probably not.
Probably not, but it's a worthwhile guy to take a shot on, I think. Despite the baggage, with the whole pride stuff, Danny Briere said that wasn't the reason they traded him, but he's not going to come out and say that publicly.
Yeah, exactly. You would never admit that as a GM. No way.
He did not get along with Torts. Felt like the bridge was burned late in the season and after the whole pride kerfuffle. And they move on. It's a nice piece of business for the Flyers. And right as that was being materialized, Carter Hart had some news come out about him. It looks like the Flyers are thinking of moving on from him as well. Thought it was going to happen the same day from the early tweets from Anthony DeMarco and David Pagnotta, but it seems more so like with what Darren Dreger said, that they're kind of testing the water, seeing what's out there for a trade. They could get a lot for Carter Hart. It's been a rough couple of years, but he's been on a bad team. He's one of the most highly touted goalie prospects in the past few years. He's really good when he's on his game and on the right team. Right now, he is not. So some teams who thinks they can fix that will give up a pretty penny and help the Flyers with their rebuild, but it doesn't sound like it's happening quite yet. The Flyers are exploring the market on Carter Hart. I can't believe I just did that. I should just end the recording.
Yeah, we're done here. Goodbye.
Doing that is one of the things I despise the most, but I saw the name and it happened, and I'm sorry. Notes app coming out on my Twitter later tonight. Vladislav Gavrikov, who we were talking about earlier, gets a 2-year, $11.75 million total, 5.875 per year extension. And this is an interesting deal because Pierre LeBrun, I think it was either LeBrun or Johnson, talked about this in Insider Trading. Maybe this 2-year deal for a guy who's not young, it's not like a younger guy bridge deal. Maybe he took shorter term because the cap could really jump in the next 2-3 years, and he'll capitalize on that. I wonder if more free agents start doing that. Maybe Tyler Bertuzzi.
That wouldn't be bad. Wouldn't hate that.
Tyler Bertuzzi. Get him at a little. See, I was gonna say a little bit of a cheaper dollar because I'm getting excited now, but Gavrikov probably got a higher number than he should have, and that's because he took less years. So I don't know.
Things up then.
But at the very least, it could really change the landscape, because when we were talking last year about Taylor Hall at one point, I said, I wish more top free agents and more teams would try to get players on 4-year deals as they enter their 30s, not 6 or 7-year deals that blow up very quickly.
Remember you saying that. I can back that comment up for sure.
Maybe this is the start of that a little bit, or another, notch on the bedpost there. But I don't know. It was interesting. I thought it was going to be 4 years at the very least. Speaking of 2-year deals, though, Andreas Athanasiou, the most recent NHL signing, stays in Chicago to, give them any chance of hitting the cap floor for 2 years and 4.25 per. Maybe he plays with Connor Bedard. Maybe he doesn't. Interesting deal there. Seems like a guy that's a good fit. And guys we're used to seeing in trade rumors are back in the trade rumor circle. Pierre-Luc Dubois, who pretty much said right when he got to Winnipeg last year, he will not be signing long-term. I think he'll go to Montreal. That's the popular belief. He wants to be there. His agent is working with the Jets to make a trade happen. And Alex DeBrincat, who we saw traded last summer for a huge haul, is providing a trade list around the league with his agent Kevin Simpson. So see where he ends up. My prediction for him is Carolina. They struck out on Matthew Tkachuk. They struck out on Timo Meier. Maybe Alex DeBrincat is the guy they finally get to up, their scoring prowess. But yeah, there's a lot going on. Travis Konechny is another name that could be in the mix there to further the Flyers rebuild. So that's another name to keep an eye on. But doesn't sound like that is as set in stone as the likely moves of PLD and DeBrincat are. Any overarching thoughts from you?
Not really. The one question I was going to ask that I forgot to bring up when we were talking about just the more Bruin specific stuff was you kind of touched on it with the Bertuzzi stuff, but the tweet I saw about them trying to move cap space or make cap space for him, what if you had to make any sort of guesses? Because obviously when you hear that, it leads to speculation of like, oh, maybe they'll move a goalie, maybe they'll do this, maybe they do that. What do you think that moving of cap space would look like in the early stages right now, if you had to guess?
First move I think they will make is Mike Riley, whether they buy him out or they trade him. I think that's the first move. And then I think Matt Grzelcyk's next.
Really? Okay. Any thought to Ullmark at all? Because I've seen his name come up more than I feel like anybody else.
I think Ullmark will take a little bit more time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the writing's kind of on the wall, even though you're losing Orlov with like the scratches for Grzelcyk, that they kind of see him as a guy on the way out, perhaps. But it's those two guys, I think, to start it.
All right. I completely forget Riley's even there half the time. So when you said him, I'm like, that move makes so much sense that, like, again, you don't think of it because the guy has been buried in Providence the entire season.
Yeah. But that's where I'm at on those types of moves.
Gotcha.
Stanley Cup final. Game 3 tonight. A whomping in the form of 7-2 by Vegas. Jonathan Marchessault needs to stop because I have a future on Aiden Hill, and he's kind of screwing that up a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Is this the time the Panthers finally lose, or are we going to see them make a comeback again?
I think I said this to my dad the other day. I'm like, it would not strike me that this is a series where a road team does not win any single game, because I feel like both these teams play so well at home. We talked about it all playoff, how scrappy. I was going to say scratchy. How scrappy Florida is. It would fit with the team name. So it wouldn't surprise me if they come out and play like a near perfect style of hockey tonight. Backs against the wall for the most part. Come out, make it 2-1, maybe steal a game, still an overtime game in game 4, and be right back to even going into game 5, because that's just how they play. But it has been a little surprising that Vegas has finally made this team look a little human. Like we talked about it, how great of a run that Florida's had so far. The fact that they have looked a little not broken, but like there's some kinks in their armor here and there. It looks like the first couple games.
They're trying to be too physical too. They did every series, and Vegas is like, "Fuck you!" Like, well,
that's the thing too.
Said, "You're not worth it, little man." Who's Jonathan Marchessault is like 5'8", so that's funny. Yep. When Ryan Lomberg was trying to start stuff, like Vegas is unfazed right now, and that spells bad news. And I think you, as the hockey expert, is going to be right with your pick.
Let's go. Should be putting money on these things. Man. I want to get your thoughts on it, because I was talking to my grandfather about it. And he's kind of brought up a decent point that I want to know if you feel the same way or not. Where he said that Vegas probably has the most physical and the biggest defense that Florida has seen maybe all postseason, and that's something that might be affecting their game. You have any thoughts on that? Agree, disagree, or just kind of where your thought process is at?
I'm sorry, I just spaced out. Can you repeat that?
Basically, he said that Vegas has, Florida has seen the biggest, toughest defense that they've seen all postseason in what Vegas has thrown at them. And he said that's kind of been affecting Florida, maybe like you said, making them play a little bit too more physical, trying to maybe match that, or just any kind of thoughts overall.
I think that's absolutely the case. Vegas doesn't have a defenseman under 6'1".
Jesus, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And a couple guys, Nick Hague is 6'6", Brady McNabb is 6'4", Pietrangelo is pretty big. White Cloud's like 6'2", 6'3". They're smallest guys. Alec Martinez, Shea Theodore 6'4". Yeah, they're fucking big. And this is one of those things that I wonder if teams try to replicate.
You got to think, take a page out of Vegas's book and see if it works for them. So
yeah, absolutely. That is going to wrap it up for Red Sox, though. Red Sox or Bruins.
No.
On to Red Sox.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said before the show to Ryan, my brain is mush. I don't know why. It's felt like the longest day of all time today for no reason. The Red Sox. Me and you share pretty similar verdicts on the team right now.
Yeah, the Red Sox that I was going to say that anybody that had lived, we haven't talked Red Sox in a while. And the reason for that is I think a couple episodes back, I said, give them to Memorial Day. We kind of figure out what this team is. They've had some good series. They've had some bad series, played well, played bad at times. I have my verdict on this team, and I know it's coming off a win last night. They're tied right now with Cleveland 1-1. And maybe some people after I say this will say, well, they're hurt, so maybe give them a little bit more time. My verdict is in on this team. They are just completely a mediocre, bland, uninspiring baseball team right now. And they're getting lucky with the new schedule of, you have to play everybody at least once this season, which I like. I think we talked about that way back at the start of the baseball season, where it was going to be interesting to see how some of these teams would fare out, against the rest of the league. You obviously have less division games. The Red Sox have benefited from that because they are staying afloat. And looking at their schedule moving forward, I did the math today. They have 46 games remaining against teams that are either barely 500 or below, being 2 more against Cleveland tonight. Then they got to play at some point throughout the season. Colorado for 3 games, Minnesota for 4, the White Sox for 6, Oakland for 6, who is just an absolute dumpster fire this season. They might not win 50 games. The Cubs for 3, the Mets for 3, the Giants for 3, and the Mariners for 3, all teams, again, that are hovering right around 500 or below. And then they have 55 games against teams who are they are well above 500, being 9 against Toronto, 13 against the Yankees. Kind of crazy that we're sitting on June 7th and they haven't played the Yankees once yet. But those games are coming. 3 against Miami, 6 against Texas, 2 against Atlanta, 7 against Houston, 7 against Baltimore, 5 against Tampa Bay, and 3 against the Dodgers. So
that's bizarre. That reminds me of the Bruins didn't play the Maple Leafs until like February this year.
Yeah. There's a couple years back too. They didn't play Montreal for a while too, right? If I remember that correctly.
It might have been this year too. I don't know. No, wait. Yeah. I think it was Montreal because they played their first game against Toronto. I think was after the Mitchell Miller blow up.
Yeah, I believe it was. But yeah, I mean that's where I'm at with this baseball team right now. Like they're playing, I don't want to say average baseball. Like I guess that's what it is, average to below average baseball, and it's maddening. We've talked about it before. This team is just. I think you summed it up perfectly a while back. That this is what they are now. Like they are fine with just being a 500 right around their team, because there really isn't anything they're going to do, and there's really nothing they can do. This is the bed they've made now. They have to lay in it. Letting guys like Xander Bogaerts go. Who, yes, Bogaerts has not had the greatest of seasons, but as we'll get into in a second, you could use his defense at short right about now. JD Martinez looks like, he's returned to form with the Dodgers, hitting 277 with 15 homers and 43 RBIs. That's a bat you could maybe use in the middle of your lineup right now, because it really seems like Masataka Yoshida is the only guy hitting. 2 pitchers that I think it's just becoming more and more laughable as the season has gone on. Nathan Eovaldi and Michael Wacha. They're only doing something called coming off winning pitcher of the month for both their leagues. Eovaldi won AL pitcher of the month, went 4-0 with an 0.96 ERA last season. To improve his record to 8-2 with a 2.24. And then Michael Wacha went 3-0 last month with an 0.84 ERA. Just had another win today where I think he pitched 6 shutout innings. 2 guys you would have had to shell out, right around $60 million if you wanted to bring both of them back. You have all these questions with the pitching staff. Chris Sale is now hurt again. I'll get into him in a second. Look, like I said, this is the bed you made. You're laying in it now. You have a completely, I got to keep using the same word, mediocre team. Very average. John Tomasi of NBC Sports Boston had an article talking about the Red Sox defensive struggles and brought up the advanced stat of outs above average, just to kind of run down what you're dealing with here and what this team consists of. You have the 35th out of 38th ranked first baseman in Tristan Casas, the 41st out of 46th ranked second baseman in I was going to say Framber Valdez, but Emmanuel Valdez. You have the 40th out of 41st shortstop and Kike Hernandez. The only shortstop worse than him when it comes to the outs above average stat is Ahmed Rosario of the Guardians. By the way, Xander Bogaerts is first in that stat. Number 1, he's first. Kike Hernandez also leads all of the shortstops in baseball in errors with 11. He had a bobble tonight on a ball that should have been a double play. So not good there. Rafael Devers, third base, you are ranked 19th out of 41. In left field, Yoshida, who hasn't been terrible, but there's been some plays where it's like it's a ball, a left fielder should be able to run down. He is ranked 17th out of 29th. You're ranked 20th out of 35 in center field when it comes to Duran. And Verdugo's been your best defender. He's ranked 6th out of 36 when it comes to right fielders. And then the defense, it's not going to get any better as the season goes on because tomorrow Adam Duvall is activated off the injured list. He is going to play center field. Kike Hernandez, that means he gets moved back to shortstop. And again, Kike Hernandez, as I've said all season, is not a starting shortstop. He should not be playing that position anymore. But because you don't have anybody else and you're relying on Trevor Story to come back, and I can't even think of the shortstop's name that they signed because he hasn't played, really done any workouts.
Alberto Mondesi.
Yep, Mondesi, that's who it is. A guy who is becoming, is he even real or not? But that's where this team's at right now. They're very average, and it's because of their own doing that they are, like I said, they're fine with bringing in all these scrap heap players, hoping to see if they work. When it doesn't work, it does not look pretty in the slightest.
Yeah. I just wish the Red Sox could get a guy like Ellie De La Cruz. I don't know if you saw the home run he just hit.
I saw it pop up on my phone because I picked him up on my fantasy team, and it popped up that I saw it on Twitter. It was like a nuke, wasn't it?
Yeah, geez. At first it was only La Cruz, now it's him. These guys that are 6'5",
6'7" shortstops
run like superhuman.
Mm-hmm.
Like, get one of those. Get one of them. Like, come on, get one of those guys. Come on.
They'll tell you they have Marcelo Mayer, but he's 2 to 3 years away. So we're probably 2 years away.
6'5".
And he's not 6'5". Yeah. So
damn it.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, your thoughts. We've talked about it before. You haven't been watching a lot of Red Sox games, rightfully so, because they are tough to watch. I mean, they can't even do the fundamental stuff. I'm sure you saw at least the clips on Twitter, the Little League home run they gave up the other night against Tampa Bay, throwing the ball around the infield, outfield, wherever it may be. Like I said, Kike Hernandez, for the people that may have kids right now, I try not to swear on this show. I try to keep it to like the radio version, but he fucking sucks at shortstop. Just not to sugarcoat it in any way, shape, or form. So like it's a tough watch right now. And again, it's their own doing. Like they don't care. It seems like about winning. The last point I'll have, I'll get to in a second. I don't think the manager, not that he doesn't care, but I think, again, maybe this is the conspiracy theorist in me. I think Alex Cora at this point is trying to manage his way off of this team. But before I get into that, like I said, any kind of thoughts that you may have on their overall play from maybe the little that you have seen?
They suck, and it's a product.
No, see, that's the problem. They don't suck. They're mediocre. Which, like, if they suck for Red Sox standards and stuff like that. But
when your fans don't show up, they fill up like 20% of the ballpark now.
Fair enough.
That's when you suck.
Mm-hmm.
Straight up.
Yeah,
no one also qualifies them sucking. You know my streak at the Garden?
Oh yeah, the win streak.
First Sox game I go to, they lose.
Oh, that's a bad streak.
Well, they won the second game I went to.
Mm-hmm.
But they suck. This team sucks. And of course I did see a win recently, but this team, they're not good. They're not good.
That's why I put them in the mediocre category. Like, again, we're going to be sitting here as the season goes on, and you hope things kind of you don't want to hope things take a turn for the worse, but my fear is that we're going to have a repeat of last season where they're going to go into the trade deadline and think that they're a team that can compete. Because again, the whole league for outside of 4 or 5 teams has sucked. Like, again, you have all these teams that are right around 27 and 33, somewhere 25 wins to 30 wins. A lot of these teams are kind of sitting in playoff races right now because the whole league has just been completely average. And again, I think that's in part because of the schedule change, which again is good for baseball. You get to see more teams and more players that you might not have seen in the past. But like, this is where I hope, again, they're not like, oh, we're 12 games out of the division. Sure, but we're only 5.5 games out of a playoff spot. So if we catch fire at some point, and maybe some of these guys coming back from injuries, like a Duvall, like a Story, Mondesi, if he ever plays, who the hell knows? Like I said, my predictions to start the season, I doubt he plays really any part of the season. Maybe you get lucky and Cassell comes back. Like, I hope they don't sit there and go, well, if we get these guys back healthy and make a move at the trade deadline, we're going to be right in it. And we might sneak into the playoffs. And then, as we talked about before with the Bruins and their management, like, all it matters is ticket sales and in playoff games. So, like, I'd like this team to take maybe, like I said, a turn for the worse. Might be not the worst thing to say, but, like, I'd like them to kind of just full on stink and be sellers at the deadline and maybe make some, again, we're way too early to talk about trade deadline stuff, but, like, you know what I'm getting at here. Like, don't be another repeat of last season where you're just treading water the entire season, going to the deadline, thinking something you're not, and then kind of come out of it. And again, just not really have any sort of plan for the future, because that's kind of seems like where we're headed again.
Yeah. It's going to be mediocre stinker shit this season.
Yep.
Like, I feel like the division is going to stay the exact same all year.
Probably.
In terms
Yep.
of, like, the spacing in between each team in terms of like games back. I feel like it's been this way for so long this season.
Yeah, it's been obviously tight. Tampa running away with it for the most part. Like the fact that Baltimore, again, wasn't banking on Baltimore falling off, but like Baltimore has arrived finally, so they are not going to go anywhere. The Yankees are only going to get better. They seemingly have found their stride throughout the season. Toronto, you would think, is going to wake up at some point. So you're again kind of left in the dust there, sitting in last place, and again, not really kind of knowing what your direction is, which again is frustrating. Like you'd like them to just full on stink, not be this team that just kind of sits around and then hopes something catches, they catch a break here and there and maybe they sneak in, because it's frustrating.
Yeah, it is. But like you clued out earlier, they could get a couple guys back that can reinvigorate things, and who knows when Chris Sale is going to be back. So
yeah. Any thoughts on him? Because I obviously saw some people that were.
He got hurt.
Were you really?
Yes.
Oh, geez, your streak is not great. You were a bad omen for this Red Sox team. Okay, so I'll put like 50-50, but yeah. I mean, like, I obviously you see that Chris Sale's gets hurt again. People run to social media and are like, oh, see, Chris Sale's hurt. Like the guy can't stay healthy. This one I don't put on him. I put it more on, again, the staff itself and the coaching decisions. And that kind of, like I said, it's going to lead me into my final Red Sox point that maybe I'm crazy, but there's been a lot of questionable things that Alex Cora has done this season. That is one of them. And some questionable things that he has said that has led me to believe that I think he might finally see the writing on the wall with this team. They're not good and they're not going to go anywhere. And as long as you have these idiots running the show in Chaim Bloom and, the upper management, not selling a team or anything like that, Cora might finally just be like, what, this team's not good enough. And I just don't want to be a part of this anymore. I'm not going to take the fall for how this roster has been constructed. Because like I said, there's been some questionable things, that have stood out to me. The stuff with Kenley Jansen, I don't know if you saw it over the weekend, but the Red Sox had that doubleheader against Tampa Bay. He picks up the save in the first game, gets it pretty easily. And then Cora with Nick Pivetta, who has not been used in a couple of days, decides to put Jansen right back out there like 3 hours later. Like, I don't know many teams that if they had a doubleheader would use their closer on the same exact game. So like that kind of stood out to me as a questionable decision. I saw a tweet the other day talking about, obviously you don't have a ton of options at short until Trevor Story comes back. But they were talking, maybe they bring him back early, have him DH and try to build him up that way. Like, I don't know if you want to rush him back just to have him potentially get hurt again. Like I said, I know you don't have a ton of options at short, but how much longer are you going to go with Kike Hernandez at the position who just clearly can't play it? The Chris Sale stuff that I was talking about, having him at one point this season throw back-to-back games of 110 plus pitches, and now he's hurt again. Like, you could see that coming from a mile away. And then a couple of comments, like I said, too, that stood out to me. Cora's never been a soft-spoken guy. He was always kind of shared his emotions or shared his feelings on how things are going. But a couple of things that stood out to me, this was in that John Tomasi article I mentioned, talking about just the state of the team. Some of the things that stood out, he said flat out, we're not a good defensive team. The numbers don't lie. And then also took a shot, not a shot, but again, maybe it's a shot. This is how I take it, at least. Maybe it's a shot towards how the team was constructed, saying we have a pitching staff that doesn't have swing and miss stuff. We get 2 strikes and we induce weak contact. We have to make the play. When we do that, we're really good. When we're not making plays, we struggle. Like, to me, that I feel like is a mini shot at Chaim Bloom and the construction of the roster. Like, we're not a good defensive team, AKA get better guys that are more suited to play the positions we need. And then we have a pitching staff that doesn't get swing and miss stuff, AKA get a pitching staff or bring in some starters like an Eovaldi or like a Walker. I know Walker's not a big strikeout guy, but, guys that can, have some stuff to get the ball by guys. So that kind of stood out to me. I feel like maybe this season more than ever, we were seeing Alex Cora do some questionable things and say some maybe questionable things that might raise some eyebrows here and there and say, well, maybe Cora has had enough of this kind of dumpster fire this team has been the last couple of years. What are your thoughts on that? Anything? I know I talked a little bit there.
I'm kind of on the side of he wants out. That's kind of what this feels like. He's like, I'm saying this because I'm fed up. And if Bloom season wants to keep me around, what the fuck ever. If he doesn't, cool.
Oh, it's like you see it in every sport. Any team struggles. Who's the first guy to go? It's the manager. You don't tend to fire the GM before you fire the manager. You're not going to, we talked about it before. This is something they have any indication of selling this team to get just new ownership in here. So if someone's going to go, you can't fire the players. Alex Cora is probably going to be the scapegoat, which sucks because obviously we know what he can do when he is given a team that actually has some talent on it. Again, like I was running the show. It's Chaim Bloom that gets out of here because, again, what has he really done for this team? We talked about it numerous times. The farm system, it has some great prospects on it, but you ask anybody around, who specialize in that kind of stuff, they're still a middle of the pack prospect organization, stuff like that. Obviously, the big league club is struggling. You make decisions to let guys like Eovaldi and Walker go, who you could use right now. Like Martinez is an interesting one because, strictly a DH, so do you really want to bring him back? Bogarts might not look like the worst guy to let go. If his wrist is going to continue to be a nagging problem for him, maybe that's something that kind of derails things for him down the line. But again, who knows? So yeah, just again, the decision-making process when it comes to certain things. You could talk about, Cassell has not gotten off to a great start. You wasted a couple of years at the first base position waiting for him to get here. Now, if he's not going to pan out, you're still kind of in limbo when it comes to that spot. So there's plenty of questions and plenty of problems with this team. And again, does not seem to be a plan really moving forward.
No, this team's felt pretty directionless for a while now. So,
which is pretty pathetic for a big market like it is.
It certainly is. A sad way to end the show.
Yeah, pretty big downer, big letdown there. One actually, real quick, as we were going to get into, when you usually ask me, any other final thoughts before we go? I did see one NBA thing we didn't touch on, because I didn't think it was that important. Damian Lillard had some comments, because obviously there's been trade rumors about him. He was asked about, where would you want to go? Boston came up, Miami, New York. I can't remember who he had the interview with. But he said if there was an obvious choice, it'd be obviously Miami I want to go to. And then obviously Brooklyn, because he knows, and is friends with Bam Adebayo and, somebody on the Nets. I can't remember, but I did just see from NBA Central, via Showtime of all places, said that Damian Lillard says he is, quote, definitely not joining Miami if they win the title. Miami wins a championship. That definitely ain't happening from Damian Lillard. So maybe there's another reason for people that are rooting against the Miami Heat. If they win, or if you're rooting for, rather, I can't kind of mess that up, but maybe something to keep an eye on there. If Miami wins a championship, maybe that gives the Celtics a better chance of landing him in a trade. If you think they're going to go that route, and if Miami doesn't win, and maybe Damian Lillard ends up in Miami. So something to keep an eye on.
Any fucking sense.
Yeah, I know. Maybe he just doesn't want to pull the Kevin Durant card and is like, I'm going to go to the team that just won the finals and try to run it back with
you
them.
Willingly played for the Portland Trailblazers for your whole career, buddy.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just really bizarre. That's my takeaway. If you didn't see, Ellie De La Cruz just hit a triple too.
Did he? Nice. More fantasy points for me. Halfway to the cycle. Kid's going to be an absolute stud. Yeah. Like you said, it is weird though.
6'5" shortstop.
It is weird. Baseman. Obviously that's a position you want some sort of size at, because shortstop's more so the bigger guys on the diamond, but or just more athletic guys. But the fact that you said the start of the 6'6", 6'7" guys coming up through the minors and him and Cruz have kind of been a little jarring of late. Like you said too, guys that can run like gazelles and hammer the ball everywhere, play good defense, and have cannons for arms. So
and another thing, make sure the last name is Cruz.
Yeah, seems to fit the bill.
Or I don't know if it technically qualifies as both Cruz. It's De La Cruz and Cruz, but you get what I mean.
Yep, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Not worth nitpicking. That is going to wrap it up for episode 146 of the Salvaggio and Cratty Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us wherever you find your podcasts. You can find us on Twitter at Mike_Cratty, at Ryan_Salvaggio, and the show at Selling Cratty Pod. We're also on TikTok, and you can follow the full press coverage on Twitch and YouTube pages if you wish. But until next week, we'll see you. Stay safe, stay healthy, be nice to people, all that good stuff, and we'll talk to you then. Peace out.